I am currently writing a book about history of, I guess, modern Liverpool Football Club. So from Shankly to Klopp, and now so my dad picked Liverpool, and it turned out of the two brothers, he made the best decision. It was almost like, losing your dad or something like that, right? This sense of a father figure just leaving very suddenly. And I found the same with Klopp. I couldn't concentrate on work. People were getting in touch all day, and it was kind of like grieving, for something that we were losing. I've talked to supporters in Morocco and India, Rwanda, Canada, Sweden, Norway. Norway has a huge Liverpool supporter club. I mean, like every second Norwegian is a Liverpool supporter. It's crazy. So I would have to tell students, particularly if I was teaching sports history, and there'd be Man United fans in the class or Chelsea, I'd have to tell them, don't tell me the result or I will fail you in this class. Obviously, I was joking.
مشجعي الريدز أينما كنتم، مرحبا بكم في هذه الحلقة الخاصة Moroccan Reds Podcast. اليوم معنا ضيف خاص، ضيف خارج أرض الوطن. قبل ما نقدمه لكم نحيو بعدا الكو بودكاسترز الاعتياديين ديالنا سفيان.
السلام عليكم.
تزيزنتي
زيزنت اخويا.
بوبكر. مرحبا بالجميع. وغنقدم لكم دابا غنسويتشي بالانجليزيه حيت الضيف ديالنا قادم من الديار الانجليزيه ومقيم كندا، دونك دابا غادي نسويتشي بالانجلي. So fellow Reds, welcome to our special episode of our Moroccan Reds podcast. Special guest today. You all know Stink's song Englishman in New York. Today we are welcoming Englishman in Toronto. So I'll try to pronounce it well. Today we have Alan McDougall, right? So Alan McDougall, perfect. Alan McDougall, he's, as I said, so Englishman living in Toronto, historian, lifelong Red, history professor at the University of Guelph near Toronto. So we're very happy, delighted to have a quick chat with you today in our podcast. Maybe to start, we would like to know how did you become a Reds fan? Was it like a family legacy, or maybe there was a period of success where your passion matched with Liverpool, or any other reason?
Yeah, well, thank you very much, everyone, for having me. Very happy to be here and talk about Liverpool. So yeah, it is a family story for me. My dad was born in Liverpool. He was actually born in Liverpool 4, so the Anfield district, closer to Everton's ground. So his older brother was an Everton fan, and I guess being the younger brother, my dad picked the other Liverpool team, which was Liverpool. And this was back in the 50s when Everton were probably the bigger team. They had a bit more money, a bit more success. Liverpool were in the old second division then. My poor uncle is now having to follow Everton through all their troubles. So my dad picked Liverpool, and it turned out of the two brothers, he made the best decision. So yeah, so it was the family tie through my dad. He grew up in Liverpool. He moved away from Liverpool when he went to university, but all of the rest of the family, my sister, my brother and I, my mom as well, became huge Liverpool fans. And so that was the beginning of the connection, really. And we still had family in Liverpool. My granddad lived in Liverpool throughout his life until he died in 1998. And so we'd always go back to Liverpool. And in those days, you could get tickets for games more easily than you could now. So got to see them play quite often. And yeah, and that was how it all began for me. Family history and through my dad's connection to Liverpool.
But Alan, you don't have the Scouse accent. How comes?
No, I don't have the Scouse. No, I never had it because we left when, well, my dad left before he had family. So we grew up in the south of England, and So everyone in the south of England would, I'd have to explain to people because I grew up in the 80s, which was when Liverpool, of course, were hugely successful. So everybody supported Liverpool at that point. They were everyone's second team or favorite team.
Yeah.
So I had to explain, look, really, my dad's from Liverpool. I have good reasons to support Liverpool here. So yeah, no, I never had the accent. My uncle's family, they stayed in Liverpool for longer. So a couple of my cousins who are Liverpool fans kept the Scouse accent better than I did. So yeah. So it's something I should work on, really.
Yeah, but because at the same time, like I had the chance to meet you in person and to talk about Liverpool on one of your projects. But basically, you don't have neither a Canadian accent nor
No,
a Scouse accent. And
yeah.
that's like drive me to my question that I want to ask you, like, because you told us that your dad was born in Liverpool and after that you moved from Liverpool to another city in England. But like now I know that you are living in Canada mostly for more than, I don't know, 2 decades, right? And
Mhm.
my question is, how can you manage to support Liverpool from far away? Like I have the same feeling, right? With the time difference, with the flight tickets that are really expensive, and games like, for example, games that are played here at 6:30 in the morning or 7:30 in the morning. How can you manage that? How could you manage that through all the years?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite difficult to start with. I remember the first day I moved to Canada. I'd just arrived in Canada, and first thing I did was call my parents on an old phone box to get the result of Liverpool's game. I remember we were playing Newcastle. It was Gerard Houllier was the manager, and we I think we were winning 2-0, and it was pulled back to a draw 2-2. But that was when I just arrived in Canada, 2002. So I was actually calling on a landline. But of course, I was lucky because I moved to Canada at a time like you really, when you could start to watch a lot of Liverpool games, and in fact, sometimes more Liverpool games than I could watch back in England because you can watch 3 o'clock kickoffs, which you can't watch in England. So yeah, I mean, I paid to watch games on television. When I moved to Toronto, I lived in Guelph for a few years. Then I moved to Toronto, started to watch some games with the supporters club in Toronto when I first moved, and so had a little bit of community through that. Um,
Did
yeah,
you
you get used to it, right? You get used to watching at silly times, and it's not the same. It's not as good, and I didn't get to see as many games in England, of course, because I wasn't there very much. But I was lucky that I kept contact. My
Yeah,
mum and
yeah,
dad.
for sure.
My mum and dad moved to Canada actually in the 70s. My dad,
Oh,
like me later, taught at a university in Canada on the west coast in the 70s. And of course, in the 70s, uh, there was no English football on television. Soccer was kind of, you'd get the results in the newspaper the next day. So my parents were in Canada when Liverpool were in the European Cup final, Champions League final, for the first time in 1977. To get the result of the game, they had to go to the local radio station and ask the DJ on the radio station in Victoria, in British Columbia, to give them the result of the
wow.
game. So that's how they found out that Liverpool beat Borussia Mönchengladbach, win the European Cup for the first time. So much easier for me. I could watch most of the games on TV. But I don't know. It's a bit more of a lonely experience, I think, when you're an expat watching games. You kind of get a bit isolated, and you kind of take defeats a bit more seriously, I find personally. So I don't know. Yeah. So that's what I've done, and you get used to it. So yeah.
Yeah, especially
Yes.
with the European night, if we are talking about 3 p.m.
Yeah.
games, and most of the time either people are studying or working, and
Yeah.
it's a little bit difficult, like especially for those games, because like for weekends game, it's obvious that you can wake up in the morning or watch it around midday. But if we are talking about Champions League, Europa League, I don't know, FA Cup or League Cup that are played midweek at around 3 or 2, it's a bit tricky, right?
Oh, it's horrible. Yeah. I sometimes, so I teach at a university, so I teach classes, and sometimes those classes are scheduled at 2:30 in the afternoon, which, as you say, that's in Eastern Standard Time in Toronto, that is kickoff for Champions League games. So I would have to tell students, particularly if I was teaching sports history, and there'd be Man United fans in the class or Chelsea, I'd have to tell them, don't tell me the result or I will fail you in this class. Obviously, I was joking. But I would sometimes tell this. I would. No, I wasn't joking. No, I would. There was a Manchester United supporter, and I said to him, we were playing in the Champions League one year, and I would so a lot of these games I will watch late. So you have to close your ears to the world for a few hours. Very difficult to do. So I said to him, don't tell me the result of the game, and he told me the result straight away. So you can't always trust Manchester United fans. Is the lesson?
Never.
For the other question, we will move to your project as a writer. Can you tell us more about your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am currently writing a book about history of, I guess, modern Liverpool Football Club. So from Shankly to Klopp, and now, of course, I'm talking to you guys, and I'm thinking about the end of the book being very different, because a few weeks ago we all thought we had Jurgen for 2 more years, and now turns out we're coming to the end. So feeling very sad about that. But also when I heard the news, I thought, oh shit, I'm going to have to change the end of my book, because I had this idea of the book would end and we'd look at the future with Jurgen Klopp, but it's going to be different now, of course. So yeah, the book is it's an international history of supporting the club more than the games. So how people have experienced supporting Liverpool over the many decades that the club has been one of the biggest clubs in the world. And so I've got various chapters, and basically each chapter has a starting point that's usually a big event in Liverpool history. And then I'll take that. So, for example, I've just finished writing a chapter on 2005, which I know I talked to a lot of you about, the Miracle of Istanbul. And so I talk about the game and fans' reactions to the game, but then kind of circle back a bit to look at the club leading up to that period and so on. So the idea is each chapter looks at a famous moment in Liverpool history, and then it kind of widens out to look at the history around that, mostly from the perspective of fans, and particularly, and of course this is why I talked to some of the Moroccan Reds, particularly I'm interested to get the perspective of international supporters, because there are lots of books about Liverpool that talk about its great local support from Scousers.
Yeah, Scouse.
But I think, I know from living abroad and from talking to many people just how much the club has meant to people who sometimes have never been to Liverpool, who only know the club from television, who can't afford to go to see games or can't get tickets. So to me, it's always fascinating to see how a club that means so much to me can mean so much to other people in all different parts of the world. I've talked to supporters in Morocco and India, Rwanda, Canada, Sweden, Norway. Norway has a huge Liverpool supporter club. I mean, like every second Norwegian is a Liverpool supporter. It's crazy. So this international aspect of the story is really important. So yeah, it's trying to weave the fan stories into the history of the club, and yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment, and just trying to finish the project in the next few months, hopefully.
So
Right.
Alan,
Sorry if I interrupt you, Youssef,
Yes,
but
okay.
I'm just wondering, how did you get the idea of starting this project? How did it pop up in your head that I need to write a book about Liverpool and having this perspective of including all fans worldwide in it?
So, I mean, basically, without boring you about my history as an academic, I'd done my PhD on German history, and then I got the job at the University of Guelph. So I was lucky enough to get a permanent job teaching history, which was great. But then I had to think, well, what will I do next? And I mean, the thing I love most of all was sport, and the sport I love most of all is football. So kind of figured out ways of becoming a football historian. The first step was to write about German football history, which is what I did. I wrote a book on the history of football in communist East Germany. then the second step after that, someone asked me to write a book about the international football of history for kind of students at university. So I wrote a book about sort of a short book about the international history of the game. So I've written a couple of books on football. You know, I was lucky enough to feel fairly safe and established in my career, and so really writing about Liverpool was the next obvious step. You know, I had a background as a football historian. I'd always been a supporter of the club. So that was the next step, was to write something about the club. And of course, there are lots of books, as I'm sure you guys know, having read them. There are lots of books on Liverpool. It's a well-written about football club. So part of me thought, you know, do I need to add to that body of literature? But then, you know, there's lots of gaps in the stories, I think, particularly for international supporters, also for women supporters. You know, I think there's some gaps there. So yeah, so I started interviewing people, including some of the Moroccan Reds, as you know, and got in contact with kind of archives and collections of documents, some from the club itself, some from the family of, for example, Bill Shankly. Started to build this idea of, you know, what a book about Liverpool could look like. And yeah, so it went from there, really. So yeah, it's kind of a passion project, really, for me. You know, I'm lucky enough to be able to write about things I care about the most. So, and that is, outside of friends and family, Liverpool Football Club.
Very
Perfect.
passionate. And so, as you said, Alan, you have met various fans across the world. How did it feel to meet those various different cultures sharing the same passion? What was the thing that amazed you the most or fascinates you about talking to very different people across the world speaking about Liverpool?
Well, I think one of the things that's really most interesting is that, you know, my favorite thing about football, and we could talk a lot about the problems in the global game, you know, the wealth discrepancies, we could talk about racism, we could talk about still some fan violence in places. You know, there's lots of problems with modern football. What I've always loved about football is the way that you can be anywhere in the world, in a taxi in Paris or on a holiday in Morocco or something, and football will be the thing that can connect you. So to me, what was most moving about talking to fans from around the world was that shared dedication to following Liverpool. And having lived abroad, you know, I know it's very difficult to follow Liverpool. You have to get up at different times. You're not lucky enough to be able to go to games like people who live close to Anfield. So it requires a real dedication to do it. And sometimes it's quite a lonely pursuit because other people in your kind of town or in your school don't really care about football, or perhaps even worse, they support Manchester United or something like that. So you can feel a bit isolated sometimes. So for me, the coolest part of the story is seeing how people who grew up in, I don't know, Goma in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mumbai in India, Casablanca or Rabat, have these similar experiences of falling in love with the club. And it might be because of a player, a Steven Gerrard or a Michael Owen. It might be because of a game, 2005, the Miracle of Istanbul, or maybe a smaller game. But that point of connection is shared by fans across the world. And to me, that's very special. And it means that wherever you travel in the world, pretty much anywhere, you know, I could go to any city pretty much, and I could find a community of Liverpool supporters. And I wouldn't have to agree with them about politics or everything else, but I would have this shared sense of community with them. And so that was brilliant to find out. And the different ways in which fans have kept in touch with the club, particularly, I suppose, older fans, because, you know, if you, for example, I talk to fans in New Zealand, huge time difference. It's very difficult to follow from New Zealand. And some of the people I talked to became fans of the team in the 70s, let's say, when it was very difficult to become, you know, it's not like today where we're lucky enough that we can watch most games. There are supporters clubs, you know. none of this really existed then. So one of the guys I interviewed, his dad was an itinerant preacher. Like, so he went around New Zealand preaching Christianity. And so the guy I interviewed and his family would follow their dad around New Zealand. And I remember him telling me that to watch the 1981 European Cup final. It's the one where Liverpool beat Real Madrid 1-0 in the final. Pretty much our last win against Real Madrid, sadly. Anyway, he knocked on the door of a stranger's house and said, "You showing the football?"
Wow.
So there's all these.
That's crazy.
Like, yeah, it is crazy, and yeah, there's all these great stories of, you know, the different ways in which people have been able to support the club, and often like people. You know, I know lots of supporters who, like some of you guys, have been to Anfield once, or some have never been yet, because it's expensive. The tickets are a nightmare to get. It's very difficult to get tickets, even if you live in Liverpool. So, you know, I think I appreciate that you can be a huge Liverpool fan, even if you haven't been to Anfield, or even if you can't live in Liverpool. So I think that's the big lesson. There's a lot of similarities between Liverpool fans around the world. And I think we live in an age where there's a lot of division and hate. So it's nice to see the ways in which football can connect people. And I think Liverpool does that better than any club in the world. Of course, I'm very biased.
That's pretty normal. And like on the other side, I think that personally it should be my last question, because like I want to talk about Liverpool as a team, like about your project. On the other side, what was the challenges? Or because like you are working on a huge book, right? It's not some book that it will be written in 2 nights, whatever. So what was or still the challenges that you faced or you are still facing right now working on your project?
I think the big challenge is, for me, as someone who loves Liverpool and kind of knows the history quite well as a supporter, is also a professional historian, is the balance between a book that is about games and the history of the games, and a kind of more analytical historian. So it's trying to get the balance between Alan, the Liverpool fan, and Dr. McDougall, the historian. And I think that's quite difficult to do, because it's hard to be a fan and to write objectively. They don't really go very well together. So I think that is the difficulty. Plus, honestly, there's so many things in Liverpool's modern history that you could write about. So, you know, there's obvious points. There's tragedies, of course, at Heysel and Hillsborough. There's these amazing moments like 1977 or 2005 or 2019. But you can't include everything. So I think I'm kind of finishing the first draft of the book now, and I keep telling friends that it's just getting longer and longer and longer. So, you know, what I'll eventually have to just cut words out, which is okay. That's normal in a book. So yeah, those are some of the challenges, I would say. I've got too much to write, and sometimes it's hard to balance Alan the fan, Dr. McDougall the historian.
Might be difficult. Like I can understand it, and even me talking to like Manchester fans, whoever, and I try to be objective, but at moments I just crack, because like being a Liverpool fan, it's more passion than, like, I don't know. Being a Liverpool fan is something that we can only feel as a Liverpool fan. I think Youssef and Soufian share have the same feeling. We share the same stuff, the same passion, and yeah, somehow I get you, and especially for you being academic at the same time, trying to, or like being a Liverpool fan, being objective and not objective. Yeah, difficult. But
Yeah, you see,
at first,
and I think international supporters actually probably have more, from my experience of talking to them, actually interact more with Man United or Chelsea or maybe even Man City fans or Real Madrid fans or AC Milan fans, whereas because you probably meet more of them, whereas I tend to avoid those people. No, I
Actually,
tend.
in Morocco, we are facing more of Barcelona and Real Madrid.
Well, Barcelona, that's right, because I remember a lot of you told me about, you know, Spanish football history and the watching of Spanish
yeah,
football in Morocco. So a lot of Barca fans, which it's not such a direct rivalry, apart from in 2019, of course. But there we go. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, but it's all
Thanks,
good.
Origi.
You Divock Origi like made it easier for us, I think.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
Yeah.
like on the other
and
side,
he led us to have many enemies today from Barca fans. Origi.
Yeah.
yeah, we
Yeah.
can't even talk to them. But at the same time, Real Madrid fan get pity on us because like they trashed us, if you can say that, like many times now. Like it's all 3 times in
Yeah.
Champions League
Yeah,
finals. Like it's not fun talking to a Real Madrid fan because of their, I don't know, success in the competition at first, and secondly because like on head to head they had the edge on us. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's funny.
football
It's
and that's
funny.
what we
We,
like.
we we never used to have like we beat them in the 1981 European Cup final, and then even under Rafa, we beat them famously
Yeah,
4-0 at Anfield. So it's the recent history of Real Madrid is a lot worse. And
exactly.
now I never want to see them again. Yeah.
For,
Same here.
But
We can talk to Barcelona
everything,
fans.
yeah. For Barcelona, we
I
beat.
think,
Yeah, for Barcelona, we beat them in the 1977, I think, in the Europa League.
Yeah, and I was actually funny enough. I was
and
just
Yeah.
writing about this week that we beat them. Sometimes gets forgotten. We beat them in the semi-final of the UEFA Cup in
yeah,
2001, the treble season, and that was the game where
2001, and
Yeah.
yeah,
No, 1977. The goal was
yeah, and
by
77 as well. Yeah, so we have
Yeah.
Barcelona. I don't think of in the
yeah,
knockouts.
and 2007 as well.
Yeah.
2007 when Bellamy scored the goal, and
The
like
famous
we had
celebration of
like
golf.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, the celebration of goal because of the problem that he got
Yeah,
with Reese, I think.
yeah,
Yeah,
Reece,
like
yeah.
like they never beat us, I
No.
think, on
No, we have a good record
officially.
against
Yeah,
Barcelona.
Well, we
true.
lost. We
No,
lost
no,
to them, but they never
Yeah, we lost to
knocked
them,
us in
but
the knockout stages. Yeah.
No,
exactly,
yeah,
they never knocked that out. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think that all our history right now, it's like the modern history of from, I don't know, the past 10 years or something like that. It was down to one man, and you mentioned that because
Mm,
like now of your book, how you will reshape it somehow because of recent information that we got,
yeah.
and we are sad about it. Like my question
Mm,
about it is more how when you woke up and you heard the news about Klopp
mm.
leaving at the end of the season, what what was your feeling at that moment, and uh, how how did you try to absorb it, and what do
Mm.
you make of Liverpool season right now since he'll be leaving at the end of it?
Well, it's interesting. So the historian in me thought as soon as I heard the news about Klopp, which was a complete shock to me, like I'm sure for everybody, because I think we all assumed he'd signed the contract, he was going to stay for another couple of seasons. The team, Klopp 2.0, is doing great. So it was a shocking announcement to everybody. So of course it made me think historically. Bill Shankly, 1974, Kenny Dalglish in 1991. Two legendary managers, probably apart from Klopp, the most beloved Liverpool managers who both left very suddenly and kind of on both those occasions, it was almost like, losing your dad or something like that, right? This sense of a father figure just leaving very suddenly. And I found the same with Klopp. I couldn't concentrate on work. People were getting in touch all day. And it was kind of like grieving, for something that we were losing because yeah, you can't replace Jurgen Klopp. You might get a good manager, a good coach. You're not going to get that whole package of character and the sort of principles. For me, Klopp, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the things about modern football now I find increasingly hard to take. And Klopp to me was a bit of a barrier against that. Is someone who felt like he came through lower division football. He managed at smaller clubs. He's been a bit of an underdog. So to lose that character, who I feel understands the city and the club and the history of the club quite well, yeah, it was pretty devastating. And so I'm feeling still pretty upset about it, and how it will affect the team and the season. It's difficult to say. If you'd have asked me after the Chelsea game, like last week, it's all happiness. But then football is like that, right? Then
Yeah.
Arsenal happened on Sunday, and
It was quite
you
the
think a little
opposite.
bit, yeah, the opposite. But I don't think that had a lot to do with the players, suddenly deciding they weren't going to play for Klopp. I think that was the end of a busy period for Liverpool. We had a few unlucky injuries. Some big players didn't play well. So I'm pretty confident that for the rest of the season, most of the players anyway, will want to do it for Jurgen Klopp. I mean, one of the many great things about him as a manager is the way he's always managed to keep an inclusive squad. You very rarely get players who are unhappy about Klopp or who complain to the press, or get their agents to talk badly about Klopp. He's got this genius for including players, through squad rotation, through bringing through young players. So I'm very confident that the squad will want to send him out in style. And I mean, if somehow we could beat, well, I won't say anything too rude about Manchester City, but if somehow we could beat that team to the league title, I mean, I think, the celebrations will never end.
It will be
Really.
the piece on the cake.
Yeah. Do you think
any thoughts about his replacement?
Well, it's interesting. To me, there doesn't seem to be a really strong pool of candidates this year at the moment. There are times when you feel there's a lot of young coaches who are around to kind of step in. I was thinking back to when Liverpool replaced Gerard Houllier, for example. There were quite a few good managers around the time, and you could have picked famously between Benitez, who we got, and Jose Mourinho, who was also around then. This year, it feels that there aren't as many strong candidates. I mean, the obvious one who we'd all love to see from a sentimental point of view is Xabi Alonso.
Yeah,
and he's doing really well at the moment, but he hasn't been a manager for long, so there's that consideration. He's also a very different character to Jurgen Klopp, of course, like much more sort of low key, much more cerebral. He's much more of a thinker than an outwardly passionate manager, I guess. But I think, like most supporters, if we have to replace Jurgen, and maybe he'll change his mind, maybe we can all make him change his mind, I don't know. But if we have to replace him, I think Xabi Alonso would be the man. I don't see any other candidates who really inspire me. There are talented coaches, but I think now when you manage a really big international club like Liverpool, you have to have a certain personality to do it. You saw this, for example, with Graham Potter at Chelsea, that you can be a great coach, but you also have to have that personality to manage a big club.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's hard to replace. And I think Alonso would have that in a different way than Klopp. But the sample size is very small with Xavi. I mean, he's doing great at the moment, but he hasn't been a coach for very long. So ideally, we'd have had 2 more years of Klopp, and then Alonso could come along. But we've had 9 years of Jurgen, so that's pretty great. So I think we should be pretty happy and grateful for that.
Do you think that we should be more optimistic after Klopp, or the opposite after Klopp leaving?
It's really hard to say. There are a few red flags, I think. There's a few warning signs. One of them is that, in the last couple of years, there's been various talks about FSG wanting to either sell the club or sell parts of the club. There's been a few key personnel changes, like Michael Edwards leaving. Then the kind of some of the struggles in finding a replacement as the director of football. Like it feels a bit worrying to me that we might be replacing a manager and a director of football and some backroom staff in one summer. So that's the worried part of me. Then the other part of me thinks if they can get the appointment correct, maybe it's Xabi Alonso. And now what Klopp's done is create the nucleus for his and his success at second-rate Liverpool team. We have a lot of great products from the academy. We signed a new midfield, and it's been successful. We have a great attacking forward line. So I feel more optimistic than pessimistic about Liverpool after Klopp. But I guess we'll find out, in about 6 months or a year, because I think we'll see the answer to the question how much of this was down to Klopp and how much of it was the structure behind him as well. I think one of the interesting things about Klopp is, you notice a lot of the players who he made or helped to make great at Liverpool have since struggled since he's left the club. So sometimes I worry that when Klopp leaves, the players who he and his coaching staff have made so good might not be quite as good. So I don't know. We'll see.
Let's hope for the same scenario that happened after Shankly leaving and Paul Paisley was appointed as a manager. Yeah,
that would be the ideal, right? It's just such a different world of football now that obviously the difference in '74 was that Shankly left, but the coaching staff essentially stayed. Like Bob Paisley became the manager. The rest of the coaching staff stayed, so there was that continuity. Obviously, Klopp is going to be taking, as you do now, you take your entire coaching team. So, we'll get Xavi Alonso and his coaching team, for example, and we'll see how that goes. But I do think that there's a good basis for continuity. I think a lot of the players will want to stay. I don't see everyone wanting to leave suddenly. Yeah, it's going to be uncertain. So, and we've been spoilt for nearly 10 years to have, a stable structure, this fantastic manager who's also a fantastic guy. I mean, it's not often you get that. So I think, and if, we remember what was there before 2015 and particularly, the early 2010s, with Hicks and Gillette and Roy Hodgson, I mean, that seems like a nightmare now, but it actually did happen. So I think we have to be very grateful that we had 10 years nearly of Klopp, and I think we can be cautiously optimistic about the future.
I think we will move now to the quick fires. We will start to ask you some questions with 2 options, and you pick one.
Okay.
Okay. First one is Liverpool or Toronto?
Liverpool.
As a city.
Yeah, as a city.
Yeah, you should say it as a city.
Not as a team.
Not
as a city.
Football-wise.
Well, yeah, football and soccer-wise, still Liverpool. As a city, sentimentally Liverpool. Although I do love Toronto.
Yeah, okay. The second is winter or summer?
Summer.
What?
Yeah,
That's normal. That's an obvious answer, right?
I'll come and hang out with you guys, and we'll watch some football in Morocco. And I love summer.
Yeah. Okay. The third question is 7-0 at Anfield or 5-0 at Old Trafford?
Ooh. 5-0 at Old Trafford, I think. And it was a better season as well. So 5-0 at Old Trafford.
Okay. The fourth one is a bit complicated. Is it winning the league and Klopp leaving, or missing the Premier League and Klopp stays?
Oh, wow.
That's the hardest question.
I think winning the league and Klopp leaving, because we will be so happy for so long and the party will be so big. I think somehow the universe will make him come back.
Don't you think if you choose missing the league and Klopp stays, that he will win the league next season? Or
Anyway,
maybe. I'm just looking for a good ending. I'm just looking for a good ending for my book, to be honest.
Okay. The fifth and the final question is between 2 strikers, Fowler or Owen?
I pick Owen. I love them both, but Owen was always the striker I felt a bit more affinity with, funnily enough, which is very un-Liverpool, because he was seen in Liverpool as the kind of less popular figure than Robbie. Of course, he went to Manchester United and spoiled things, but yeah, Michael Owen, I loved Michael Owen. In 2001, when we won the FA Cup against Arsenal, it was one of my favourite days as a Liverpool supporter, and that was 2 goals from Michael Owen against a brilliant Arsenal team to win. So, Michael Owen.
And still,
what do you feel? Okay. What do you feel when you see Owen wearing a Man United jersey? What was your feeling?
Yeah, it felt pretty bad. I mean, I would compare it. I mean, I didn't feel the same betrayal with Owen as I did with Torres, because Torres went
Oh,
directly from Liverpool to Chelsea, and I loved Fernando Torres. So that for me, was the biggest heartbreaker. I think Owen. So Owen, when he left, went to Real Madrid. He wanted to come back to Liverpool, and between his agent and the club, they couldn't arrange it, and so he went to Newcastle, and then he went to Manchester United, and it didn't look good. But there were 3 clubs in between. So I think for me, the betrayal was slightly smaller. Yeah, Torres to Chelsea was the one and then he played against us a few days later. That really shattered
our
my,
heart.
it sort of shattered my illusion about footballers and loving a club. Like you kind of
yeah,
want this idea that they care as much as you do about the club, and it's just not true. I mean, they might play really hard and be very loyal, but in the end, they don't care about the club in the same way you do.
yeah.
So, yeah,
Even
I still have a
Spurs
bit
once.
broken out. Yeah,
Owen's still the only player, the only Liverpool player to win the Golden Ball.
yeah, he's
Then,
the only. That's right. The
yeah,
Ballon d'Or. That's right. Yeah, and yeah, he was a great player for us, and yeah, it gave me a lot of happy memories. And I think the thing with Owen is that he was a very professional guy. He kind of lived the right way. He took football very seriously, and I think let me put it this way: he made the most of his talents. Injuries stopped him a bit, but whereas I always think Robbie Fowler, as brilliant as he was, should have played more for England and should have maybe won more things than he did. So Owen had the more successful career, I think, because he was a harder working, more dedicated guy in the end.
All right. I think that we have it's split between us. Personally, I prefer Fowler, or I don't know, I feel more connection, even though I didn't watch him play. But I feel Fowler is more. He has more Liverpool values than Owen. I don't know. Anyway, that
Yeah,
was your
yeah,
answer.
yeah.
yeah,
That was your
I mean, I
answer.
think
And
he does.
opinion.
Yeah, he does. I mean, I just feel, to me, Owen's a bit of I feel historically he's a bit of an undervalued figure because of what happened probably with Manchester United. Because I think he was always known as England's Michael Owen a little bit because of the World Cup in 1998. Yeah, I loved Robbie too. I was there actually when at Anfield when Robbie Fowler in 1997, when he was still like at the peak of his Liverpool days, when he scored a goal in a UEFA Cup game or a Cup Winners' Cup game, and lifted his shirt to show support for sacked dock workers in Liverpool, which was like a political gesture, and he got fined by UEFA for it. So Robbie's a good guy, and we love Robbie too. Yeah, but I had to pick somebody, so there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Well, I think we arrived at the end of
at the
our
end, yeah.
podcast episode. Thank you very much, Alan, for your time. It
My
was
pleasure,
very nice
guys. Lovely
speaking
talking to you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank
Very
you. Thank you,
lovely,
Alan.
and we can't wait to read your book.
Yeah, I can't
Any
wait to
ideas
get it out
about
there.
when
When it will be
be
released?
released?
The releasing date.
Next year, so 2025.
Next year.
It should be out in about kind of towards the end of the summer. So by which time we'll have a new manager and I'll have figured out the ending of the book. Hopefully,
Hopefully.
number 20, the biggest street party in Liverpool ever. You guys can come over and we'll all meet up and celebrate for days and weeks.
All right. Hopefully, it will be like the biggest chapter in your book.
Oh my God, yeah, that would be
Yeah.
the biggest ending chapter to finish the
And
book.
the best
Yeah,
ending.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Best till last.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Alan. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and hopefully we can get you even on our next episodes. It's always a pleasure to talk to Liverpool fan across the world, and especially people who have more knowledge and can give us some insight about history and everything, and having fun together. Thank you, Alan.
My pleasure,
Yeah,
guys.
Thank you.
Up the
Thank you,
Reds,
Alan.
lovely to talk to you.
thank you, Abdul Reds. Yeah,
Keep in,
take care.
keep in touch.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great day.
Ciao.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks.